your own opposition so that you can come to power.
So Leninism is a form of tweaked communism with a goal that is of a detriment to the fellow man because you want to go for power.
Well, communism doesn't really exist as such. It's something you can't define, but Leninism you can. And the point I'm trying to make is I'm getting slowly to it here because we're going to talk about Leninism versus Fabianism.
I'm doing the what comes first, the chicken or the egg thing. I guess.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, it's hard to define, but you see, one of the theories that Lenin taught was the strategy of a feigned defeat or feigned retreat in order to lure your enemy into a vulnerable position. Now, this is not original with him. You can find this in the history books. I discovered that strategy brilliantly taught by Tamerlane, the Mughal warrior. He would when he was confronting a superior military force, he couldn't defeat them one-on-one on the open battle. So what he would do is just before nightfall, because they never fought at night, they always fought in the morning when the sun came up, he would make it look like his forces were retreating. He would put his forces, first of all, in a very vulnerable location where they couldn't defend themselves very well. It looked like it was a stupid act, and the enemy would say, look at that idiot, he put himself into a vulnerable position. We'll get him in the morning. But just as the sun set, he would make it look like he was retreating. He would put his major forces, half of them off to the right in a hidden location, another half to the left in a hidden location in the trees and bushes and the rocks and so forth. He'd have a few soldiers to be seen, and all of the camp followers with their wagons and their horses and their cattle and oxen would leave, and they'd drag branches behind them to kick up the dust to make it look like the whole army was retreating. And and they would do that, I said in the evening. Actually, that's not correct. They do that as the sun was coming up, so that the enemy who was waiting for the sun to come up say, they're retreating. The cowards are retreating. Let us attack.
Let's go for it.
Go for it. So they would come galloping down right into the position of indefensible location there, and of course they'd be trapped by both sides. So this is not original with Lenin. It was taught by Tamerlane. Sun Tzu taught it in his famous little treatise on art of warfare. But Lenin applied it to the strategy of diplomacy and politics.
Wow.
You see. And he said, therefore, let us pretend to be defeated and destroyed so our enemies will lower their guard. And the first time that happened was when the Bolsheviks first came to power. The economy was in a terrible state. People were starving, they couldn't produce anything, and they desperately needed money from the West. And so Lenin called his followers together and he said, all right, comrades, we got to drop our rhetoric for a while. We got to quit talking about killing the dirty capitalists. He said, we all know we're going to do that someday, but for now we need them. So let's open a hand of friendship to them and talk about free markets and investments and so forth. This was way back in 1917, all right? This is way, way back. And it worked. And of course the West came in with money and investments, and then after a while they built their industry up. They saved themselves from collapse so they could stay in power. And this is what he said, do whatever you must do to achieve and maintain power. So they got to that position, and then they changed their voices again and said, okay, we're going to kill the capitalists, and they expropriated all of the property that had been invested and so forth. They've done that several times in history, and so when I saw this so-called breakup of communism, I said, well, there they go again, you see? But people don't know this history. They don't know the strategy of Lenin, and so they took it, once again, they took it at face value. Now, you listen to the speeches of these old-time Bolsheviks or communists, so-called Leninists, what they really are, and they'll be talking about how bad Stalin is and so forth, and we're sure glad we don't have that anymore. Well, by the way, they're rebuilding a statue of Stalin right now in Moscow, so that cycle is about to go through again.
What do you know?
Yeah, what do you know? Big surprise.
Yeah.
But they said, we're so glad not to have this old-style communism anymore, and they go on and on and on about free markets and investments and so forth. And then they'll say once in a while, but don't forget, we will never abandon the principles of our great leader, Lenin. Well, not one person in 1,000 knows what that means. If you know the principles of the great leader Lenin, what he's really saying to his followers is, hey, comrades, this is the game we're playing. We're going through this cycle one more time so that we can consolidate our power and lull our opponents into an indefensible position, make him vulnerable so that we can smash him with our clenched fist, is how he used to say. So having said all of that, this is Leninism. It still exists in the world.
Yeah.
Not under the name of communism, but under the banner of Leninism.
Very interesting. So we had communism, and then Leninism has come to be. And then there was the second branch that we opened with originally, Fabianism.
Well, this is the branch of communism that is perhaps the least known in the Western world.
Yeah.
And yet it is the most important to us in the Western world because we live in it. It is what is directing our lives. The word Fabianism comes from the Fabian Society, which was formed in England in 1884, just before the turn of the century, when a lot of these things were happening.
Fabian Society.
Fabian Socialist Society, they called themselves, and still do. We're still
There's
there.
that socialist word again.
Well, they love the word socialist, but they really, in their literature, they talk about it as they should, as collectivist. They say we are collectivists, and sometimes they use the word socialist interchangeably with it. The Fabian Society was named after a Roman general by the name of Quintus Fabius. And he was famous in history for defeating his enemy not by beating him on the battlefield, but by wearing him down in delaying tactics. In other words, he would wear his enemy down by refusing to make a frontal engagement against the Carthaginians. That was the main ones that he was, Hannibal and people like that.
Wow.
And he just kept, delaying, and finally the attacking forces would give up, and they'd say, we can't stay on the battlefield here for years,
Yeah.
So they'd go home. And so he was famous for delaying tactics and drawing things out. The Fabians selected him as their symbol or the symbolic name on purpose. They objected to the Leninists, not on the basis of their goals of collectivism, because they agreed with that. They were saying to the Leninists, you people are stupid. You're going about it in the wrong way. You are trying to conquer the world and make a new world order based on the model of collectivism through force and violence and bloodshed and quick revolution. That's the wrong way, they said. The proper way is patient gradualism. They said, let's follow the motto or the tactics of Quintus Fabius and delay so there's no confrontation and drag it out over a long period of time. And instead of confronting your enemy head on, we will infiltrate his institutions. We will move our people into his government agencies, into his educational institutions, and into his charitable organizations, into his corporations, and we'll gradually convert the world to international socialism in that fashion.
This dragging it out sounds like Congress.
It is Congress.